Several years ago, long ass time ago, actually, I had sort of a job interview with a guy here in Dallas that was really more of a conversation um, than a job interview. But a buddy of mine worked with him. He was basically this guy who um, had a business where he went around and he talked to CEOs and thought leaders and world changers and stuff like that, all over the place, and he recorded their worldviews and their theories on management and all that kind of stuff. And anyway, this buddy of mine worked for him at the time. I was in need of more permanent work, and he introduced me to this guy, and he kind of told me before I met him. He was like, it's gonna be a very different kind of conversation than what you're used to. I didn't really know what to make of that until I met the guy, and he is only one of a handful of people that I would call straight up geniuses. This dude was an absolute genius. Now, I consider myself to be smarter than the average bear, or I like to think so anyway. But this guy was just on a completely different level. And my buddy was right. Like, just talking to him was such a bizarre situation to be in, because I would be talking to him and I would ask a question and he would give this whole high-minded thing, and like everything was a big picture overview of something, and when he would tie this other thing in, and he would ask me questions and I wasn't really even sure what he was asking or what he was trying to get out of me. It was kind of like two different species trying to talk to each other. I mean, when somebody's just on that much higher of an intellectual level than you, it's very hard to meet in the middle. Maybe that's why I'm fairly good at what I do here on YouTube, because I'm not up there. I'm more down here and I can kind of talk at the level that most people are. But anyway, it was just a fascinating conversation. I remember him asking what I wanted to get out of the job, and I'm kind of like, money. I wasn't going to lie to him and be like, working for you would be the pinnacle of my life. No, that's not what I want to do with my life, but it was a job, and I thought he seemed like an interesting, kooky kind of guy, And he was like, so it's a mezzanine. And I'm like, pardon? And he's like, no, so it's not where you really want to be, but it's like halfway up. It's a mezzanine. He kept using the word mezzanine, and I was like, okay, that's not a word I would use, or anybody else in the world for that matter, but okay, I'll go with it. It was just that kind of thing. It was just trying to communicate with somebody that was very clearly on a different level than me. The reason why I bring that up is something I hadn't thought about in years, but I thought about it last night. In fact, kind of had deja vu about that while watching the Joe Rogan interview with Elon Musk. I had heard that there was going to be this interview, and of course I wanted to see it live. It came on really late where I am, and didn't wrap up until way later. I should have been working on Monday's video, but instead I thought I'm going to stay up and watch this, because Elon doesn't give big, long interviews really, and it's always very clipped and structured and that kind of thing. Joe Rogan's interviews are long and they ramble and they go into all kinds of different crazy directions. You never know where he's going to go with his interviews, and that's what kind of makes it interesting. So I stayed up and I watched it, and I got that sense watching Elon in that situation, the way he talked. Especially early on, I think he was a little bit hesitant. He was a little bit uncomfortable. You could kind of tell at first. But there were a lot of interesting things that came out of it that I'll talk about in just a second. But of course, there was this one moment where he smoked pot. And that's, the reason I'm using this camera is I woke up this morning and I checked my little Google news feed, and it's nothing but Elon smoking pot, and how Tesla stocks have tanked, and how executives are now leaving. It was just everywhere you look, it's this one shot right there of Elon taking a big old puff. Now, here's the deal, guys. I sat there and I watched this 2.5-hour interview. And that's all you're hearing about. Let me set up exactly what happened there, and you can go watch it yourself. You don't need me to explain it to you. But here's what happened. Around the desk that they're sitting at, and they're sitting on opposite sides of this desk, there's just random stuff everywhere. At one point, Joe Rogan got out this samurai sword and showed it to him that he just had sitting at the end of his table, like you do. But one of the things that was kind of sitting next to Elon was this little container, like a little, I don't know, just container that had like kind of Mexican designs all over it. And Joe was like, "Hey, that's I got that in Mexico." And Elon opened it up and he was like, "What?" And Joe was like, "Yeah, I keep my joints in there." It makes me think of that old Saturday Night Live sketch. Put your weed in it. But and Elon was kind of like, "Oh, okay, whatever," you know. And he kind of handed it back to Joe Rogan. So Joe Rogan takes it. And he has a spliff or a blunt, I don't know what the right term is, but it's the cigar with the pot wrapped up in it. So he just lights it up. And I'm kind of laughing because, of course, that's something Joe Rogan would do. And so now they're talking about pot. And Elon is saying that he doesn't really care for pot. You know, like most people, he had tried it once upon a time. He didn't really care for it for reasons that I think I can explain here in a minute. But Joe offers it to him, and he takes it, and he kind of does this, and he goes, and he hands it back. That's all it is. He was literally holding it for maybe 10 seconds. I don't know, maybe 15. That's how long he even held it in his hand. But he puffed it, maybe even half a puff. I'm not even sure if he inhaled. I'm not trying to defend the guy. I'm telling you what I saw. He like barely puffed and went, and he handed it back. And I remember watching it and I was like, that's all anybody's gonna be talking about tomorrow. And sure enough, breathless, pearl clutching over Elon smoked pot. First of all, it's legal in California. It's legal in some form or fashion in almost half the states in the United States. All these people that are like, "Here's my pot." Dude, did you not get the memo? We've all kind of decided it's not that big a deal at this point. You must not have gotten that memo. And by the way, like, this is the perfect example of why everything that I read in the news about Elon Musk, I have to take with a gigantic grain of salt. Because, again, a 2.5-hour conversation where they covered all kinds of topics from artificial intelligence to the possibility of electric airplanes to cars, obviously, to the Boring Company type stuff and the idea of 3D transportation. They got in the end really talking about like worldviews and about life. And I mean, they wrapped it up by talking about Elon was saying, you know, we need more love in the world. Love is the answer. I mean, he was saying all this kind of stuff. He went into kind of emotional detail about why the way we're consuming carbon right now, our processes of using fossil fuels and putting it up in the sky and all that kind of stuff, it's bad news. They talked about all kinds of stuff. It was a 2.5-hour conversation. And all anybody's talking about is that 1 second where he put a joint to his lips. And that's so indicative of almost everything that you read about Elon Musk. They take some nugget, some kernel of truth, and they blow it completely out of proportion. And I want to say real quick, I understand how this works because I'm in this. It's very easy to say, oh, worldwide conspiracy and all that kind of stuff. And there are definitely a lot of people out there who stand to gain by Elon's downfall or by Elon not doing well. So to say that there's nothing out there conspiratorial, I think is a bit naive. But what it really comes down to is, if you run a blog or a YouTube channel or a news site, you got to make money to do that. I have run blogs. I have run viral video sites. I have run a YouTube channel. I get this. If you post something and it gets a lot of views and you make some money from that, you are an idiot if you don't at least keep doing that a little bit more, you know? I talk about Elon on my channel, or I have historically, traditionally, because a lot of the stuff it's very in line with my channel and the kind of stuff that I talk about on my channel, but B, it gets good views. A lot of people tune in for something that has to do with Elon. So it's not so much a conspiracy as it is just people looking after their own self-interest. If they post an Elon Musk video, a news article that's salacious in the headline in any way, shape, or form, a whole bunch of people start clickety-clacking on it, and they make money. And so, wow, that was buff. So when I see these salacious articles about Elon, I know that it's maybe only 5% true. Look, is it true that he took a puff of marijuana? It's true. But was he just sitting there huffing down on it? No. he like kind of did, handed it back, and then said he didn't like it. If anything, it was an anti-drug ad, because he said he didn't like it. What's far more interesting to me about this interview was when they started getting into basically what it's like being Elon, what sets his brain apart from other people, or what fuels him, what drives him, that kind of thing. There was a lot of stuff that I wanted Joe to talk about with him, but now that it's over, I'm kind of glad he didn't. Not to go off track here for just a second, but look, as much as I'm defending Elon here, like, the reason why these kinds of like stupid things like the marijuana thing piss me off is because there are real issues. There are real concerns with Tesla. There are delivery delays. There's growing pains that they need to overcome. And yeah, he deserves all the criticism that anybody wants to level at him for the whole pedogate thing. I wish he would leave that alone. He kind of doubled down on that recently. I don't understand why he keeps going back to this one guy. Of all the people in the world that criticize him, why does he keep going back to that one dude from the cave? I don't get it. It makes no sense. I wish he would stop. And by God, I want more than anything for Tesla to hire a COO. I was really amazed when I found out they didn't. They need desperately a Gwynne Shotwell, like they have over at SpaceX. I really couldn't believe that they didn't have one. So there's plenty of things to criticize Elon Musk on, very legitimate things. And when I see people, tying themselves to these kind of salacious, just bullshit problems, bullshit scandals and stuff, I can't take you seriously anymore when you keep doing that. That's why I just, like, when I see articles from CNBC nowadays, I'm just like, I can't even read this. I don't believe a word of it, because you guys have posted such crap over the years. And falsehoods, just straight up falsehoods from them. So, but going back, the part where he was talking about what it was like being him, again, this sort of made me think of the guy that I interviewed with, so long ago. He really comes across to me as somebody who's sort of, and I don't mean this in a bad way at all, but sort of on the spectrum, or on a spectrum of some kind. He talked about how, like, his brain never shuts off. Like, think about the times when you go to bed and you're desperately tired, but every single problem in the entire universe starts popping up in your head. You start worrying about the sun going out, and you start worrying about black holes, or you just start worrying about that thing you said 20 years ago to the girl that made you feel stupid, and she probably doesn't remember it the next day, but you're still thinking about it 20 years later. You know those nights when you go to bed and you can't sleep because your brain just won't shut off? I feel like that's Elon Musk 24 hours a day. And that's the way he's been his entire life. He talked about that in the interview. He talked about how, like, he was 5 or 6 years old when he realized that he was different from other people. Like, other people just didn't think the way he did, or at the levels he did, or at the volume that he did, And again, I think maybe that's why he doesn't like marijuana, because if you are already somebody who is like a fire hydrant of thoughts that you just can't manage, can you imagine what that's like on pot? That would be a nightmare. I wouldn't like it either. So when they started talking about stuff like that, I thought that was really interesting to me. And I feel like that's a real insight into the way he operates. And when you see all these stories about him, like sleeping under desks and stuff like that, that's just who he is. He's kind of a kooky guy. He's just kind of a kooky guy, and he always has been. I worry about him sometimes. I feel like it would be good for him to sort of shut that off every once in a while. Maybe that's why he does the Ambien. I don't know how often he does Ambien, but it's been reported that he takes it. He probably should take something like that to give his brain a little rest every once in a while. His brain is not operating normally. You could argue that it's operating better than most people's because he's coming up with these ideas, but I would argue that it's not so much that he's coming up with ideas, it's that he executes on those ideas. We all come up with ideas every day, and there's probably a huge percentage of people out there that have that same kind of hyperactive brain thing going on, but they don't execute on those ideas. Whatever it is in him that makes him execute on them, he does. And that turns into things like Tesla and SpaceX and PayPal and all these crazy things that he's been able to do. But I just wish people would stop clutching their pearls over stuff that doesn't matter when it comes to Elon Musk. and just posting these salacious articles just so that they can make a little bit of money. It's gross. It's not fair. I feel for the guy. I honestly feel for the guy. Like, especially after watching last night's interview, it was just like, I remember at one point he said, "I don't think you would want to be me," and I think he means that. It's what's going on in his head all the time is probably challenging to say the least. Maybe even nightmarish at times. So, but he manages it somehow. Sometimes he doesn't manage it very well. And he probably needs to be managed a bit. Again, why they should probably have a COO over at Tesla. But I wanted to share those thoughts on that because I woke up this morning, like I said, and I've been trying to work on video stuff, and everywhere I look, it's just nothing but Elon Musk smoked pot, and now everything's falling apart because he's smoking pot. Oh, come on. Seriously, what decade are you living in if you think that somebody taking half a hit of pot is the worst thing in the world? It's... Anyway, I think part of the reason why I feel for the guy is because I have a bit of exposure. This video's running long, I apologize. I have a bit of exposure to the general public through my my YouTube channel. I know what it's like when I do a video and I say one thing wrong. Maybe I have my facts wrong, or maybe I just misstate something. And even though it's a 10, 15-minute video, that's like all anybody talks about in the comments, or that's all that I see is just people like going crazy because I said something wrong. I did a video on ISRO, the Indian Space Agency, ISRO. I was calling it ISRO. And I guess a couple of times I said ISRO and it sounded like Israel. Because to this day, I get comments from that video. They're like, "You said Israel, it's ISRO, idiot." You know. So even when I say things right, I still get that hyper scrutiny. And I'm like here. And Elon has like this going on. I can't even fit it in the frame. The kind of hyper scrutiny that he has with every single movement he makes, every single word that he says. And there's two options there. One is to just keep being yourself and do you, boo. And the other is to completely manage and gesticulate and articulate every single word that you say and become some soulless, CEO or politician. I don't want Elon to be that. I don't want anybody to be that, but especially not Elon. And I actually applaud the fact that he goes on things like Joe Rogan and he says what he means. And he doesn't, he does manage his words quite a bit actually, but he still, I think, puts forth the effort to be himself and to be authentic. And sometimes that includes some warts. That's true of all of us. He's just willing to show his. I don't know. But that's what I wanted to talk about that. If you haven't had a chance to watch the video, I'll try to put it down in the description below. But it's an interesting talk. They talked about a lot of cool stuff. You could see he was very nervous in the beginning. And I don't know. Again, for me, it made me really empathize with him a little bit more because his life is challenging. I don't know that I would want it. I would like to have his abilities, but I wouldn't want to... it's kind of like a wheelchair would be fun to roll around in for 10 minutes, but if you're stuck in it, it's not that fun anymore. That might not be the best analogy, so apologies if it didn't work. But anyway, those are my thoughts. Everybody calm down, please, and I'm going to wrap this up. Have a great weekend, and I'll catch you guys next time.